Okay, governments must be limited to prevent the possible abuse of power. And we do this because throughout history there's been countless examples of governments actually doing this and abusing power. So by the time the founders sat down during the convention to establish this, we had a lot of history and precedent set of people abusing it. So they specifically set up our Constitution to try to limit this possible abuse in the future.
Constitution. Well, what is it? We had our Constitution Day, and everyone got a pocket Constitution. It's a rule book. It's a framework, lays out what a country's government is.
Okay, so this rule book has a few different parts. So the Constitution limits governments because it says exactly what it does have the power to do. So it starts out by saying what type of government we're going to have, how it functions, how laws are made, as well as the rights and responsibilities of citizens. So all of these things, they seem like they're adding powers, but at the same time, they're also limiting it beyond the scope of those powers that are listed in the Constitution.
Another idea that we have of limiting government is with the rule of law. Look, not even the president, the leader of a country, our government officials, no one is above the law. And we have this concept because we have to create limitations, even on those who we elect to be in power. So it's enforced, it's fair, it applies to everyone.
Okay, a third concept of limiting government is the separation of powers. And that's the concept of taking different types of power and assigning it to different people in government. And our government divides it into three branches. We have a legislative, an executive, and a judicial. Some countries do it a little differently, but those are the three basic ways that most countries separate their powers. You have one group of people that enforce the laws, the executive, one group that makes the laws, the legislative, and then one group that interprets the laws, which in our case is the judicial system.
Consent of the governed pretty much means if you're going to enter into a social contract or you're going to agree to set up a government, you got to provide your consent. And how do we give our consent? Every 2 years, every 4 years, etc. Mostly through voting. Mm-hmm. Right? We provide our consent. We approve of who's in the government through voting. And even if we don't like the way something is set up, we can amend the Constitution. Mm-hmm. We can change laws, provide our consent that way. Mm-hmm. So voting is how we do that.
Good. And to provide an example of that, there's actually a ballot question coming up in my state of Rhode Island in which we're going to choose whether or not to have another constitutional convention in the state of Rhode Island to actually rewrite the state constitution, which is kind of wild to think of. But but on a local level, we may actually be making some changes to it, either amending it or just changing the text of the Constitution itself. Wow. Okay, rights of the minority. And this concept means that majority rule doesn't mean that you can abuse the rights of the minority. Okay, so say there's a small or unpopular group in society, just because they lose an election or they're on the other side of the democratic system, it doesn't mean that you can just do what you want to that group or completely ignore or violate their rights to life, liberty, and property.